So earlier today, Fallout 76 got a brand new update. There's going to be a 4GB update on consoles and a 2GB update on PC. Bethesda is dubbing this patch 7.5, and I actually think that's a pretty representative naming. The main new additions to this were survival mode and some of the changes coming along with that. Putting further, we saw some other changes to the now named adventure mode, that being the kind of classic mode that you've been playing all along in this game. But even further, there's actually a handful of bug fixes shipping also. In this video, I'm going to do a couple of things. Go over some of these changes, look at what's different about this game, look at some of the new stuff in the new survival mode, but then also give my first impressions around this new survival mode as I've had a few hours to play it myself now. And it seems like, at least on release for this one, not everything's working exactly how it was supposed to. So one of the most notable changes with this new update is now as you click the play button, you will see there's two options. You have adventure mode or survival mode. First, I'll look at what's different about adventure mode. A lot of it is pretty much exactly the same. One of the most notable changes is actually slap damage was removed. In the past, when you actually went up to another player and attacked them, you wouldn't deal full damage right away. You would deal slap damage, which was typically very minuscule. Well, following this update, now you're going to deal no damage. You can keep shooting them over and over again, but nothing will happen. Then if that player decides to attack you back, full PvP will be opened for both of you, which is largely exactly how it used to work before. Just the slap damage part of that is now gone. You deal no damage instead. That was one of the only real exclusive changes to adventure mode, but in addition to the game overall, there were several changes made to both adventure and survival mode. One of the most interesting of these being that weapon damage during PvP combat has received overarching adjustments to help a wide variety of weapons feel more deadly versus other players. And they further expand on this, saying that it's really meant to limit the health you lose from a single hit, so hopefully as a result of this, one-shotting will no longer be possible. But even beyond that, one other notable change coming to both adventure and survival mode, now after respawning or fast traveling to a location, you will have a limited time where you are invulnerable, so other players cannot immediately one-shot you. So there's actually quite a bit to unpack with this. As far as the balance changes around all of those weapons, it's not really clear what's different. Bethesda never went into any more detail than this line, just there have been overarching balance changes. In order to actually discover these, you have to go in game and try everything. I'm sure over the next couple of weeks we will get a more comprehensive list as we see a new meta emerge to see which weapons are now better. In the first few hours, I've seen some discussion around things like the LMG being better, certain shotguns being better, or even certain melee weapons, which already were really good. But either way, it seems like there are definitely significant changes going on with this. It seems really odd to me that Bethesda wouldn't just kind of explain explicitly what was different. Like, did they go to some of the worst performing weapons and actually manually tweak their numbers, making them better in PvP? Or alternatively, did they just do an overarching, hey, if it doesn't do a lot of damage, then we'll boost its damage. If it does a lot of damage, we'll lower its damage. As of right now, we don't have answers for any of that, but hopefully over the next day or two, we get some more information from Bethesda. But if you're noticing any significant changes with the weapons you use day to day, let me know in the comments down below. And to be clear with this, based on Bethesda's wording, it seems like this is only impacting PvP combat. These aren't flat balance changes to the weapons in general, but just when you're actually fighting other players. In other words, in the adventure mode, it'll probably have next to no effect, but in the survival mode, it might actually be pretty profound as to which you can use and which aren't that good to use. But to build off the follow-up point they had with this, that one-shotting is no longer a thing, it definitely is. This is on the survival server, and you could quite clearly see a high-level player one-shot a lower-level player. I'm not sure if this is a bug with the present server, if one-shotting is supposed to be removed, but maybe something got messed up in the updating and so it isn't removed. But at least as of right now, I have definitely been getting one-shot from other people, mostly from melee builds or things along those lines, and I certainly have been seeing other people, especially with explosive weapons, one-shotting players. Typically they're lower level. Further reinforced by the final point that with invulnerability after respawning or fast traveling, it seems like this only works some of the time. I think it might be location dependent to an extent. For example, when respawning at Vault 76 or fast traveling there, I did find that yes, I could not be killed immediately. But some of the train stations on the map, I found that no, this definitely wasn't the case. There's a very apparent issue where you could actually get killed before you could even see the game. This happened to me and I just kind of sat there watching everybody get spawn killed over and over again by this one guy. So the invulnerability part of this definitely has some issues, and just in general, you could often find people spawn camping in this new mode, sitting around some of these areas waiting for low levels to spawn, and even if they try and run away, chasing them down after the fact. So hopefully in the next couple of days we see an update or even just some more information from Bethesda around these things, but until then, I would definitely be wary about fast traveling to certain locations in this new survival mode. Although outside of that, looking at the survival mode itself, there are several changes also brought to the table. Naturally, one of the major ones is there's no longer any PvP restrictions. When you see another player, you can now attack them for full damage. This includes players under level 5. So especially at Vault 76, you can be a very high level and take down many freshly spawned low level players. There also is now a mechanic that if you approach another player and you have your weapon out, you will appear hostile, like with your red name. But if you approach them with your weapon holstered, you'll actually have a regular white name appearing neutral. This doesn't impact anything, they still can attack you, they still can focus you in VATS, but I've actually found that if I put my weapon away while facing somebody, a lot of the times I won't end up getting attacked unless we were previously fighting one another. And there are some other overarching changes with this game mode. Now you can only have one stim pack active at a time. You gain 20% more experience on the server. When you die, you lose twice as many caps compared to adventure mode, but also when you kill another player, you gain twice as many caps compared to adventure mode. This part in particular can be pretty good, especially if you're on the lower side but still relevant in a PvP mode. I gained over 700 caps in just like 10-20 minutes of playing by finding a good spot and sniping people. Fast travel is more limited in this server, so you're only able to teleport to other players that are on your team or their camps, train stations, Vault 76, workshops that you do own or someone on your team owns, but even further, you're only allowed to respawn at Vault 76, train stations, or people's camps. And this actually has a pretty profound impact on this mode. When you're trying to hunt down certain players or get to a certain area, you quickly realize how far certain train stations are apart. Strategically placing your camp down can be invaluable, although we're going to talk about camps a little bit more in a minute. One new component of survival mode that people have gotten somewhat frustrated with: when you die in this new survival mode, you're going to lose some caps, you're going to drop all of your junk, but you'll also drop a random amount of your aid items. We don't have concrete numbers as to how random this is. It does again change every time you die, but some of the times you'll drop a lot. Like it's certainly over 20-30% of your aid items. There have been times where I take down other players and I find quite a bit of loot on them. I'm not sure how large their original stacks were, but I wouldn't be surprised if, let's say, you have 100 stim packs on you. It seems very likely there's a chance you may lose half of them. As I mentioned before though, as of right now, we don't have concrete numbers, but don't make the mistake of just going into survival mode with all of your aid items on you. Be smart with what you take. You actually have to plan this out because you can lose a lot very quickly. Also, a really major component of this new mode is the only people to appear on the map are people that are either wanted. After somebody kills you, you could actually place a bounty on their head. It's going to cost at least 200 caps and you could raise it up as high as you want, but the bounty that is actually on their head will only be half of that. So if I place a 200 cap bounty, so somebody else would get 100 caps for taking them down. But outside of that, you also will find the top 3 players based on survival time. So how long they've gone without dying on that given world. And in my experience, this is typically what I focused on and what I found a lot of other players focusing on. You would hunt down these players, they would become very large targets on the server. And oftentimes while hunting down these players, you would find other players also trying to hunt them down. But the last major change coming with the survival mode is in survival mode challenges. So in effect, with this new game mode, you'll now have the option to complete a weekly challenge, but you have to complete the challenge in survival mode, which is naturally more dangerous because people can kill you. Each week you are going to gain a legendary item as a result of this. Bethesda has shared with us the first 6 weeks of items, the first one being live right now, where you have to kill 25 legendary enemies. And yeah, honestly, that's all of the changes with this new survival mode in a nutshell. Outside of that, there were actually several other things added to the atomic shop. Some of these are fairly cool, so if you've been consistently passing on items in this shop, I wouldn't be surprised if this is some of the first stuff you actually purchase from it or spend some of your long save points on. Unfortunately, with this update, it seems like there were also several issues, although these were certainly on a more broad scale. One such one was now when you actually try to look at the atomic shop for a little while, it wasn't working, although Bethesda was pretty quick to get that fixed. Also, for me at least, my friends list was glitching out. It would sometimes work, other times I couldn't see any friends, and if in a team with them, their names would just disappear. And one final one is actually in the mode itself. There's a pretty clear-cut exploit that can be very frustrating where people can create floating bases. This has been something in the game for a long time. Naturally, in adventure mode, it's not too big of a deal. It even looks kind of cool to see this massive floating structure. In survival mode, it's a bit more frustrating because in Fallout 76, you actually can't destroy floor panels. So the entire floor of this guy's base is indestructible for me. Short of me actually getting a jetpack or some other means of climbing up there, it's going to be very difficult to kill him. And as it stands, he was the survival survival time leader. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but it is something hopefully Bethesda does address with one of the future updates, because as it stands in this mode in particular, things like that can be kind of a bigger deal, a bigger issue in the game. As I mentioned before, this was a proper patch to the game, so it also came with several bug fixes. Nothing in this really stood out to me as being super massive. There have been some server stability issues as of late. In the patch notes, they talk about increasing server stability. I still had crashing, so I appreciate some of the extra bug fixes, but again, nothing really stood out as being massive or game changing. But outside of that, as far as my own impressions on this mode go, they're kind of mixed. I certainly think there is promise or potential here. There were on several occasions where I got into good PvP exchanges with another player that was typically around my level, typically also not using a legendary weapon, and we had a nice tense and drawn out exchange, truly that drama that was originally described in Fallout 4's promotional material. Although one of the real downsides of this new survival mode is that Bethesda allowed any player to join into it. Your characters from adventure mode do carry over, so that also means all of those people that bought duplicated weapons or duplicated items themselves or used other exploits are now playing this mode. So oftentimes you will encounter somebody else using a very, very powerful weapon right out of the gate. And now to be clear, people having high tier stuff isn't the biggest deal in the world. It's just people having god tier stuff. There's a lot of individuals on servers that you will find that have ridiculously good builds. Things that probably weren't achievable in a normal playthrough, but were gotten because exploits were so prominent in this game for so long. I also think there's definitely somewhat of a spawn camping issue. I'm not sure what the easiest fix for this is at this point in time, but a lot of times right around Vault 76, you could find several players just sitting there camping anyone who spawns in. Even though, again, they will have that limited time vulnerability, it's not that long, and certainly not long enough to remove this problem from the game. The other big notable part about this mode is how you see the top 3 longest surviving people on the map. The vast majority of the time I was playing this, those are my targets. I would say most of my time PvPing in survival mode was either combating other spawn campers, or alternatively just walking towards and trying to hunt down someone who was labeled on the map. This isn't inherently a bad thing, but what it does is create not the most exciting gameplay loop. A lot of times you are just kind of walking in a general direction. Sometimes people might be really far away from every other fast travel point. So as a result, many of the people who had the longest lives were people that were just in obscure locations. This didn't really seem to correlate people who were really good at PvPing but just were hard to get to. Maybe changing that up so it's the people that have the most kills on their given life could be a better alternative. Or I think really the most ideal solution would make it so if there's a lot of combat in a certain area, that gets highlighted on the map for everyone, almost like a hot zone on that server. Then you'd have an influx of other players going there to see what's going on, and thus more PvP occurring. Or maybe even certain areas of the map that get a ton of legendary creatures to spawn. People go there trying to farm those legendaries and in turn fight other players for them. I think that'd be something pretty cool that would have real good rewards, but at the same time also have consequences. But overall, I'd say the survival mode definitely has promise. As I mentioned before, this is in beta. I think Bethesda recognized that on release this wouldn't be perfect, and it's definitely not. If you squad up with a few other people, you definitely still can get quite a bit of enjoyment out of this. Also, everyone in this isn't immediately fighting each other. I had plenty of interactions where I just peacefully walked by or even played with other people that could one-shot me. In some of these clips, I was playing on my particularly low-level character. So all in all, this new survival mode is really a mixed bag. Right now, you can find a lot of really overpowered gear throughout it, making lower levels have a much more difficult time, although it certainly isn't impossible, and people are definitely exaggerating around this. It does have several glitches that hopefully will be resolved with hotfixes in the next couple of days, and even though the mode isn't perfect, I still have enjoyed it, and I definitely will be playing more of it and streaming some of it because it certainly does have potential, and with some of these updates, I think it can be made a lot better. If you're on the fence about trying it, I wouldn't rule it out completely. You might get frustrated and end up quitting, but if you already bought the game and you want to give something a go, I would say this new survival mode is definitely something worth giving a try. Either way, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this one. As always, again, I thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, but with that, I hope to see you all next time. Later.